Namaste. Welcome. Welcome to C programming. Welcome to C programming. This is the first module related to C programming. The remaining all the modules we are going to cover only C programming. Of course, we will be solving the problems using C programming. Not that we are going to just study the syntax and semantics of C language. So we will study syntax, semantics, and also the features of the C language. But at the same time, we will be solving the problems. So this module is called as Introduction to C. Introduction to C. This is introduction to the C language. Introduction to the C language. So the first session is about C. First session is about C. First session is about C. So why C? Before we get into C, why C? What is the motivation? What is the motivation behind the C language? Why we have to study the C language, or why anybody has to study the C language? Why anybody has to study the C language? Now we have Python, Java, etc., which are more popular, or which are more commonly used terms. Why we should study C language? Why we should study C language? There are many issues. There are many motivations. We'll consider one by one. C is a general purpose programming language. C is a general purpose programming language. C is a general purpose programming language. The general purpose. What do you mean by general purpose? General purpose. General purpose means it can be used for any purpose actually. That means you will be able to write all kinds of programs. That's the meaning of general purpose. Or in programming terms, or in most books, we classify the programs into system programs and application programs. System programs and application programs. Later we'll see what do you mean by system programs and what are application programs. But we'll consider system programs and application programs. System programs and application programs. So C can be used to write both system programs and application programs. So C initially was used to write programs related to numericals. That means for performing mathematical calculations. Later many features were added. And we started manipulating names, that is characters also, and images, video, etc. can also be modified using the C language. So now it is used for all kinds of programming. That's why it is called as general purpose programming language. Next one, C is a high level language. C is a high level language with some low level features. So high level language, what do you mean by high level language? What way it is high? So if you consider that, so proper explanation is not given in many books actually. Why it is called as high level language? In fact, all the languages like Java, Python, why they are called as high level languages? What way they are high? All are high level languages. What do you mean by it? So if you consider that, or if you want to understand that, so the basic machine is nothing but the hardware. The basic machine is nothing but the hardware. Now, how far it is from hardware? In the sense that, in what way it is dependent on the hardware? If it is dependent more on the hardware, then it is low level. If it is not dependent on the hardware, then it is high level. So if you write like this, hardware, and we can write while doing the programming, we will be using what are called as system calls. So above hardware, let us assume that there are system calls, and above it system programs, and above this we have C programs. So system calls and system programs, they're actually part of the what is called as operating system. They are called as the operating system. OS, operating system. They come under operating system. If you want, you can add one more level also here. This point, you can write device drivers. So these device drivers, okay, device drivers. So hardware, device drivers, system calls, system programs, and then C programs. So here you can see how far they are from the hardware, but they are not dependent on the hardware. That's why they are called as high level programming language. So device drivers are used to access the hardware, keyboard, mouse, etc. They will have their own device drivers. Device drivers are used to access the hardware, and above the device drivers will be system calls, which are actually part of the operating system. In fact, device drivers are also considered as part of the operating system, but system calls will be there, which will be interacting with the device driver programs, and above it are system programs, so which in turn make use of the system calls, and the application programs which we are going to write here. We are going to write in the C language or C programs. So C programs make use of system programs. So C programs will not bother about this hardware. They are not dependent on the hardware. That is one of the reasons why they are called as high level programming language. So if dependency on the hardware is minimum, then they are high level languages. If the dependency on the hardware is maximum, then they are called as low level languages. So all the programming languages which you are going to study, 99% of the programming languages which you study are high level languages only. Okay, of course, C is a high level language, but it has some low level features also. Low level features means which allows you to interact with the hardware in an efficient manner with some low level features. So pointers is one example. Of C language feature which allows us to effectively use the memory. And efficiently use the memory. That we will see how to use pointers. So C is a high level language. Basically, if somebody asks you that is a low level language or a high level language, and in some books, unfortunately, the term middle level language is also used. Thing like that, C is a high level language. So with some low level features. So both the system programs and application programs can be written using C language. System programs means compiler, editor, debuggers, etc. Okay. And application programs are those which you are going to make use of. So for any application, student scholarship, student marks calculation, all those things can also be considered as application programs. So both kinds of programs can be written. C can be used to write efficient programs. Efficient programs means here in programming terms, in computer terms, efficiency is measured with two quantities, time and memory. So a program should take minimum amount of memory and should execute quickly. In that case, it is efficient. So if you write C programs, they take less memory and also they execute fast. In fact, executing fast is one of the most important characteristics of C language. That's why even the large and complex software are written using C language. Though this Python, Java are very popular languages, but still C and C++ are used. C++ is an extension of C language because of its object orientation. Instead of C, C++ is used. But all the basic features of C++ are present in C language only, or they are derived from the C language only. They are derived from the C language only. So the complex software, large and complex software are written using C language. So wherever efficiency is required in computer networks, where you have to do a lot of things repeatedly, you go for C language. Don't think C is dead. C is dead. So C is very much alive and still one of the popular languages for writing large and complex software. So complex software like Unix, Oracle, the database management system, MySQL, and also device drivers are written using C language only. So don't underestimate the power of C language. If somebody says that okay, nowadays Python is very popular, why don't you study Python instead of C language? C language nobody is using. It's not true. C language is used by large organizations to write this kind of software, large and complex software. Still, wherever the efficiency is required, C and C++ are the only alternatives. The only alternatives. You cannot write such complex software using Python. But you can write in Python, it's not ruled out. But they will not be efficient. They will not be efficient. So writing is easy in the case of Python, but the efficiency of such programs will be less. As humans, we think in a procedure-oriented manner. So motivation continued. As human beings, we think in a procedure-oriented manner. So you are given any task, how do you solve it? We try to find out the procedure to be followed. If it is a complex one, we try to identify different procedures that may be followed to solve different subtasks of that main task or problem. Okay, we think in a procedure-oriented manner. So we are accustomed to it. So you use C language. So study first C language. So study C as a beginner language because it appeals to our human cognition. C is a structured programming language. All other languages are also nowadays structured programming language. So it supports structured programming concepts like sequencing, selection, and repetition. Study in detail later. So sequencing, selection, and repetition. If you write the programs using those structured programming concepts, then your programs are more readable, understandable, debuggable. C programs are portable. Portable means a program written for one computer will also work on another computer. So that is the portability. So C is a high-level language, so its programs are also portable. Similar the case with other languages also, Java, Python, etc. They are portable. And C is highly popular. It was used extensively and has very high impact on the programming world. Was used extensively and has very high impact on the programming world. Nowadays, if you are learning C, you can approach any software developer or any programmer. Definitely knows something about C, so he will be able to explain to you. But other languages, Python, etc., which are evolving, which are becoming popular nowadays. So some people may not know it, and some people may not be comfortable. And C is known to actually persons across the branches also. You do not consult computer science people, so you can consult other people also. Many languages are easy to learn after learning C. So if you consider the software used for different purposes, for EVC department, EEE department, mechanical department. So some of the software needs some kind of programming. Some of the software needs some kind of programming, and that programming is directly based on the C. Or if you know C, it is easy to program. So some software are designed like that, which are popular. So many languages are easy to learn after learning C language, and other software also you can easy to learn. You can easily learn. C features. C features. C has few keywords. C has few keywords. Keywords. What do you mean by keywords? C has few keywords. Few keywords means any programming language will have what are called as keywords. Keywords are those which are reserved for some particular purpose. You can use them for that purpose only. Any programming language will have such keywords. So if you have large number of keywords, then you have to remember them because they are designed for a particular purpose. So you cannot use them for other purposes. So there the problem comes. So if you have keywords, in fact, C has 32 keywords, may vary from version to version, plus or minus 10%. But because few keywords are there, so it is easy to remember them and you don't use them mistakenly for some other purpose. C is relatively small. Language is also relatively small. Specification is small. Occupies less space and can be learned quickly. C programs occupies less space in memory and it can be learned quickly. C is relatively strongly typed language. I am using the word relatively. The word relatively. Relatively small. Sorry, relatively strongly typed language. What do you mean by strongly typed language? Strongly typed language is one in which the information regarding the variables, type of the variables, etc. has to be specified explicitly. The type of the variables has to be specified explicitly. But what exactly is variable, we'll study later. We can say the names that are used. Names that are used are nothing but the variables. So those variables, what are the kinds of values you have to store in those variables, you have to mention explicitly. Explicitly. If it is the condition, then it is a strongly typed language. Then it is a strongly typed language. But apart from it, there are also other features also. So, but here we'll restrict ourselves to assuming that C is relatively strongly typed language because you have to declare the type of the variables explicitly. Not tied to any particular hardware or system. C is not tied to any particular hardware or system. So they are portable. So you need not bother about the portability. And C has some features like structures, unions, pointers, etc., which are advantageous. So because whenever say if you think about a student will think student data as a form of record, say roll number, name, marks, etc., as a record. How to represent those such kind of records or files? Records or files, C language need some features. So structures and union support, records and files are supported by again the same concept called as files. Pointers is one of the powerful features of C language which allows us to use the memory efficiently. And instead of wasting memory using arrays, whenever the memory is precious, you can go with the pointers. C has external standard library. So actually this library is not part of the C language. So that's why it is external standard library. Many people can have written the libraries, can add them depending on your requirement. So library, Library means somebody writes some code which you are going to make use of. Programs written by somebody, so which you are making use of. Something like your college library. So somebody has written the book, you are making use of it, you are studying it, and you are understanding the concept. Similarly, so if you want to write the programs, so everything you cannot write. So you make use of libraries, whatever are available. Compiles to native code, that means depending on the machine. So the compiler generates appropriate code which is suitable for the machine. This is the native code. It also supports macro preprocessor, which is actually called as substitution. So in the form of what is called as symbolic constant, one of the features. So you can use abbreviated forms for simple constants or simple programs. Also you can write using the symbolic constants. So it has feature called as macro processor, which processes. We'll see what is this macro preprocessor. So C lacks. So these are a little difficult to understand for you, the first year level. But nevertheless, we are going to discuss as you study more about the programming language, so you will get a clear idea. Okay. So C lacks exception handling, or C doesn't support any exceptions. Of course, I think recent versions of C started supporting it. C started supporting it. Again, said earlier, there are different versions. We'll see what are the versions. But exceptions means some abnormal conditions, some runtime errors, some errors which your program fails to handle. So those type of errors are not expected. They are not expected errors, but they happen. So you cannot write everything. You cannot write code for handling all kinds of errors. The programming language supports some features, then it is easy. Example is this divide by zero error. Usually you don't expect to divide by zero while doing these mathematical calculations. So you don't expect to divide something with a zero, because zero divided by zero means it is infinity. What is infinity? It is not clearly defined. Some large value, but computer will have its own limitation. So computer doesn't know what to do, where to put the restriction. So such errors are called as exceptions. So it doesn't have any features which allows us to handle the exceptions. And then range checking is not there. That means you want to make use of some few memory locations, and within that you have to store the values. Now if you go beyond that, the programming language is supposed to check, but C doesn't have that feature. So if you go on, continue to use the other memory or memory reserved for other programs also, C will not complain. So it may result in system crash also. The garbage collection, C lacks garbage collection. It doesn't support garbage collection. Garbage collection means, so you will be using the memory, and after that program exits A. So you don't use that to memory. So if you are currently not using it, means it is nothing but the garbage. So there should be some way of collecting all these garbage and again making it as a free memory. So as a language, it doesn't support that garbage collection. So again, it doesn't support object-oriented programming. That's why we discussed that instead of C, nowadays C++ is used. So C, it doesn't have object orientation features. So it is not suitable for complex software. complex software. So it's better you go with the object orientation. Operations to deal with directly with composite objects such as strings, sets, lists, arrays, etc. So you can say that all these are a collection of elements. String is a collection of characters. Okay, sets, lists can contain different elements. Similarly, the arrays, collection of elements, collection of elements. Okay, so C doesn't have any features which allows us to manipulate them as a unit, entire string. Say my name is there, Chenna. Now I want to add reddy to it just by say plus symbol, Chenna plus reddy, Chenna Reddy. So, but C doesn't have any such features. So it doesn't support multi-threading. So multi-threading is one which enables us to write parallel programming, or you might have heard about these multiple codes, multiple processors, etc. So whenever there are such features, multiple code systems, multi-processor systems, you should make use of such features of the hardware. You should basically make use of hardware in an efficient manner. So for that, you have to write parallel programming or multi-threaded programming. So C doesn't have any such features. Some of the operators have wrong precedence. But we cannot do anything about it. We may see which has wrong precedence. Whenever there is some kind of ambiguity, we'll check. And C doesn't have any runtime safety. So somebody can write a program using the powerful feature called as pointers, and then he can erase the operating system code also, which is present in them. So runtime safety is not supported. The Java has very powerful feature of this runtime safety. You just remember these things. Some of these things may not be easy to you to understand, but nevertheless, try to remember these things, keeping the broad history of C language. Need. This need. Why somebody needed this C language? Why people thought about this C language? So it was because of the operating system called as Unix. So people were working on operating systems. Operating system is a control program. Operating system is one which controls the computer. Okay. So people were writing such software, and what they want is, okay, I will write the operating system for this computer, but unfortunately it's not working on another computer also. I want to write an operating system which works on this computer and also which works on other computer, etc. So that means I require an operating system which is portable, moved from one computer to another computer, which is portable. So that was the requirement, and that can be achieved only using the high-level programming language. So at that time, they have chosen to develop their own language called as C. So it started with basic combined programming language, which was developed by Martin Richards. Basic combined programming language, and derived from it is B. Which is developed by Ken Thompson, and C is actually again derived from B. That's why it is called as C, because it has come from B. And C is designed by the Dennis Ritchie. So first specification of the language was published in 1978. That means what are the features of the language, etc. So that was published in the form of 1978. And the major standard was ANSI C standard. That means standard means if you have a standard specification of a language, then there will be who are called as compiler writers. But again, there will be number of compilers. C compilers, all are not equivalent. Okay, one may not be equivalent to other one. But If that is the case, then there will be a problem. So C89 standard was developed, the language specification, and all compiler writers have to follow that standard specification. So 1990 ANSI adopted by International Standards Organization. Then 1999 C99 standard, 2011 C11 standard, 2018 C17 standard. So there will be minor variations between one version and another version, or one standard and another standard. But we are not going to get into the details. As a programmer, at least as a beginner programmer, you do not bother about these standards. This is just for information's sake. Not bother too much. But whenever you are writing a large complex software, and depending on what standard which your company is using, you may have to learn some features, some additional features. So that is regarding the C language. Is regarding the C language. These are some of the references, and you are comfortable, you are good, if you are confident, then you can follow this book for C programming by Richie. Okay. Otherwise, you can follow other books. And I don't recommend any specific book for C language. I don't recommend any specific book for C language. Okay. There is a language, syntax and semantics. Just try to go through any book. After that, solve problems and try to implement them, run them computer by typing them. You'll get the C language. So you need not bother too much about the textbook. You can choose any textbook. So best of luck. Believe in yourself. You can do anything. Then definitely learn the C language. I don't say it is simple. I don't say it is complex. But you can do it. Whatever may be the case, you can do it. So believe in yourself. You can do anything. Thank you.